1933. In the dead of night, under the shroud of silence, a man walks into a cemetery. He isn't here to grieve. He isn't here to mourn. He comes with purpose, with obsession, with a twisted mission only he can understand. This man is Carl Tanzler, a hospital radiologist, respected by many, yet tormented by visions only he believed in. His obsession would lead him beyond the boundaries of morality, beyond the grip of death, and into one of the most disturbing love stories in American history. Tonight, we follow the haunting tale of Carl Tanzler and Maria Elena Hoyos. A story where devotion blurred into delusion, where romance decayed into obsession, and where even death itself could not put an end to his desire. This is Bush Forensic Files. Georg Karl Tanzler was born on February 8, 1877, in Dresden, Germany. From the outside, his childhood appeared ordinary, but Karl insisted that from an early age, his life was shaped by visions. He claimed that his ancestor, Countess Anna von Cosel, appeared to him and revealed his destiny, a woman with long, dark hair, a striking beauty, whom he was destined to love for eternity. This vision became the anchor of his existence. To him, she was not just a dream, but a prophecy, a calling, a promise that somewhere in the world, this woman awaited him. As a young man, Tanzler was restless. He traveled widely, visiting India and Australia, chasing opportunities and perhaps searching for that vision in every face he saw. After the devastation of World War I, he emigrated to the United States, settling in Florida with his wife and 2 daughters. But his marriage was strained. The family lived together, but Carl's mind wandered elsewhere. His obsession with the woman from his visions never faded. Though he had a wife, though he had children, he believed his true destiny lay ahead, with the mysterious woman he had not yet met. And in 1930, in the humid streets of Key West, Florida, Carl Tanzler believed he had finally found her. April 1930, Carl Tanzler worked as a radiology technician at the Marine Hospital in Key West. It was there, in the sterile white halls, that he encountered the woman who would consume the rest of his life. Her name was Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos, a Cuban-American woman just 21 years old. Elena was breathtaking. She had long, dark hair, luminous eyes, and a presence that seemed to radiate youth and beauty. For Carl, the moment was almost supernatural. He froze in place. His breath caught in his chest. This was her, the woman he had seen in visions since childhood, the woman he had been promised. But Elena's life was far from a fairy tale. She was already married, though estranged from her husband. More tragically, she was gravely ill. Tuberculosis had ravaged her body, a disease that, in the 1930s, was a near-certain death sentence. Carl became fixated. To him, this was fate. The universe had finally delivered the woman of his visions, and he would do anything to keep her alive. But to Elena, he was just another doctor, eccentric, persistent, and increasingly overbearing. She never shared the feelings he projected onto her. She never asked for his devotion. But for Carl Tanzler, the line between love and obsession had already begun to blur. Carl Tanzler poured himself into Elena's life. He brought equipment from the hospital into her home, convinced he could cure her illness. He mixed concoctions, prescribed remedies, and experimented with untested treatments. He showered her with gifts, jewelry, clothing, even perfume. And beyond the medical care, he professed his love. Over and over, he declared that she was his one true destiny. But Elena never returned his affection. To her, Carl was not a lover. He was not even a friend. He was a doctor, persistent to the point of intrusion, and her illness was too consuming for her to entertain his affections. On October 25th, 1931, the inevitable came. At just 22 years old, Maria Elena Hoyos lost her battle with tuberculosis. For her family, it was devastating. For Carl Tanzler, it was catastrophic. Yet even in death, Carl would not let go. He insisted on paying for her funeral. He arranged for her to be placed in an elaborate above-ground mausoleum built in Key West Cemetery. To Elena's grieving family, his generosity seemed unusual, but perhaps kind. What they did not know was that Carl had secured the only key to her tomb. Almost every night he visited her there. He sang songs outside her resting place. He spoke to her spirit. He claimed Elena whispered to him from beyond the grave, begging him to take her away. To Carl, death was not the end. It was merely another barrier, one he was determined to break. By 1933, 2 years had passed since Elena's death. Carl's nightly visits had turned into an obsession he could no longer contain. He convinced himself that Elena wanted to be with him, not in the grave, but in his arms. And so, one night, under the cover of darkness, he made his move. Armed with a lantern and a toy wagon, Carl broke into the Key West Cemetery. He pried open Elena's tomb and carefully carried her decayed body into the wagon. Slowly, silently, he wheeled her through the darkened streets of Key West, back to his home. There, behind closed doors, his obsession would reach its most disturbing chapter. Elena's body was in an advanced state of decay, but Carl refused to accept the reality of her death. He believed he could preserve her beauty, even restore it. He wired her bones together with piano wire, rebuilding her fragile skeleton. He replaced her rotting skin with wax, plaster, and silk cloth. He stuffed her chest with rags to maintain her figure. As her hair fell out, he collected strands given by her mother and fashioned them into a wig. He set glass eyes into her face to make her gaze seem alive. Piece by piece, he reconstructed Elena, or at least the version of Elena he wanted to see. He dressed her in fine clothing, gloves, and jewelry. He laid her in his bed, where she remained for 7 years. Neighbors occasionally glimpsed strange sights through Carl's windows, the silhouette of a man dancing slowly with what they thought was a mannequin. But it wasn't a mannequin, it was Elena, her corpse, lovingly preserved, bound together by wire and wax, kept alive in the delusion of one man's obsession. In 1940, whispers began to spread through Key West. Rumors that Carl Tanzler was living with something unnatural inside his home. Elena's sister, Florinda, grew suspicious. When she confronted him, her worst fears were confirmed. Inside Carl's home, in plain sight, lay the body of her sister, reconstructed, dressed, and grotesquely preserved. Authorities were called immediately. Carl Tanzler was arrested and charged with maliciously destroying a grave and removing a body without authorization. But the reaction of the public was not what anyone expected. Newspapers sensationalized the case, painting Carl as a tragic romantic rather than a criminal. Thousands of curious onlookers lined up to view Elena's body, which was put on display at a local funeral home. Elena's remains were eventually buried in a secret, unmarked grave to ensure she could finally rest in peace. But even in death, her dignity had been stolen. Her story twisted into a public spectacle. Carl Tanzler's trial collapsed. The statute of limitations had expired, and despite the grotesque nature of his crimes, he walked free. He lived the rest of his years in Florida, but never abandoned his obsession. Unable to be with Elena's actual body, he created a life-sized effigy of her, using a plaster death mask to preserve her likeness. He lived with this effigy until his own death in 1952. When his body was discovered, some claimed he died clutching the doll in his arms. Others whispered darker rumors that he had somehow retrieved Elena's real remains once more. The truth died with him, and the line between fact and rumor, between love and delusion, remains blurred to this day. This is not a story of love. It is a story of obsession. A story where grief turned into madness, where dreams became delusions, and where one man's refusal to let go blurred the boundaries between life and death. Carl Tanzler believed he had found his destiny in Elena Hoyos, but what he left behind was one of the most disturbing tales of devotion the world has ever known. Carl Tanzler's case is more than just a macabre love story. It's a window into the human mind when obsession turns into madness. Psychologists often point to his behavior as a classic example of erotomania, a delusional belief that someone, usually of higher status or beauty, is destined to be with you. In Tanzler's mind, Elena wasn't just a woman he adored. She was the literal fulfillment of visions he had carried since childhood. To him, her rejection, her illness, even her death were not barriers. They were challenges fate had set before him. But his actions also align with necrophilia, a rare and deeply disturbing condition where an individual finds connection or gratification with the dead. In Tanzler's case, this may not have been purely sexual. Some argue it was about control, the fantasy of finally keeping Elena forever, silent and unresisting. He could mold her into his vision of the perfect bride, something living Elena never agreed to become. Modern forensic psychologists also highlight the role of grief and delusion. Tanzler could not process Elena's death in a healthy way. Instead of acceptance, he rewrote reality, convincing himself she was calling to him, urging him to rescue her from the grave. His fantasies blurred so completely with reality that he no longer distinguished between love and possession, between devotion and desecration. Ultimately, Carl Tanzler represents the darkest edge of obsession, when love loses its humanity and becomes something monstrous. His story forces us to ask, was he a heartbroken man who lost himself to grief? Or a predator who used death as an excuse to claim what life denied him? This was Bush Forensic Files.